I've been thinking about the light class a lot lately, and I've come to the conclusion that it's got a bit of a identity crisis. So when I talk about class identity, I'm talking about sort of the role or roles that it fills in the game. Not even necessarily as a team, just like what is this class supposed to do? How are you supposed to play it, right? When you look at the heavy build, that's going to be protecting teammates or just protection in general, protecting yourself as well. Environmental destruction, right? When I talk about the medium build, when I think about the medium build, I think of support and sort of general utility, team utility. Support obviously being like healing and, the defib. General utility that helps out the entire team being sort of like the jump pad that moves the whole team, or the dematerializer that allows the whole team to, move through walls, right? Sort of general, team-based utility. And note when I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about damage or tanking or just, pure healing or whatever. And in that same sense, I'm not talking about DPS because I think that those are concepts that don't really belong in the finals, especially not the idea of DPS. All three classes deal a lot of damage. The finals is very smart in realizing that in a first-person shooter, everyone's a DPS. So then what you need to do is build on top of that foundation of DPS. So when you think of the light, you shouldn't really be thinking of it as a DPS class. I think that's wrong. And that's kind of where the class gets into trouble. When you think about it, I don't know, the closest thing that you can think of now, and this is thanks to some reworks that happened in year one, you could think of recon. They've got gadgets now like the sonar grenade, like the tracking dart that definitely help with that. People use cloaking from the vanishing bomb and from the specialization to help with recon. Thermal vision also helps with recon. Obviously, it makes it easier to spot targets that might be visually obscured. It lets you spot other cloaked lights. So I think that that's definitely a role that they should lean into more. But I think the problem is the specializations don't really lean into that. And then the other sort of role I see the class could fill would be like a disruption role. Gadgets that I see that sort of lend themselves to that would be like the glitch grenade. Obviously it silences players, makes it so they can't use their abilities. It shuts down gadgets that have already been set up and deployed, right? And this disrupts an enemy team's plan and forces them to do something they didn't necessarily want to do, forces them to reposition, disruption. And then the gravity vortex, which is a fantastic disruptive tool, creates basically a giant, no-go zone. And it will either force people to reposition around it, or it will catch them and forcefully reposition them into the center of it. And so does quite a good job of disruption, right? Another gadget that kind of falls into that disruption role is the stun gun. And, that disrupts by limiting your interactions. So if you're trying to capture the catch out, it stops you from doing that. If you're trying to res a teammate, it stops you from doing that. So these are both directions that I think should be pushed when it comes to the class to help players understand what the class brings to the team in addition to just damage. Because again, the other two classes are just fine at dealing damage on their own. That's why at the higher levels of play, you've seen light ignored, is because light kind of really only brought damage to the team, which the other two classes were already bringing. And to that end, I feel like to really help players zero in on that in general at the lower ranks, where it's maybe not as apparent what they should be doing with the class and why they all sort of, you see people just sort of default to just running around trying to get kills when they play as light. And honestly, I feel like that sort of play style, it hurts the person doing it as much as it hurts their teammates. It's frustrating to play with and against. It's not really good for anyone. And so even though a lot of the specializations, like I mentioned before with Cloak, can help for recon, even Grappling Hook helps with recon, Dash to a lesser extent can help with recon. The way that Cloak, by the way, helps with recon is you can cover a great amount of distance, scout ahead, tell your teammates what's going to be up there, and then use that burst of movement to get back to your team, back to safety very quickly, hopefully before you can get caught or picked off by the enemy team, right? And obviously, all of these abilities that I've mentioned have other uses as well. I'm not in favor of an Overwatch style that forces players down a line, forces players into a role, and is very constricting and doesn't let them do anything with it. I like the freedom of it. I like how it's, the finals is much more sort of Dota-like, where it gives you the freedom and creativity to play classes in multiple different ways. But just like with Dota, that game gives you a general sense of what this character can and should do, and then kind of leaves the rest up to you. And I feel like the medium and the heavy do that very well, but then the light is a bit too hands-off, a bit too chaotic. And I think that is kind of evidenced by the fact that they had to do that major sort of rework earlier on in year one, where they took all those, recon gadgets and put them onto light to give it more of an identity. And I think a little bit more work still needs to be done with that when it comes to the light class. So what I'm advocating for here is really just get some specializations that are more apparent for the light class. So I would say one for each of these roles. I would say a large area scan would be a cool sort of idea. I'm not saying, by the way, that these are what's needed. This is just sort of suggestions, right? For that recon kind of role, like for instance, a UAV. And I'm not saying recon senses because of the fact that I think the main problem that recon senses had was that it was uncounterable, right? And for anyone who wasn't playing the finals early on, there used to be an ability where you just press it and it lets you see through walls. And originally you could see through walls across the whole map. You could see teams no matter where that they were, right? And there's just a timer for how long that lasted, and you can flick it on or off. Then they reduced the distance that you could see, but it was still really overpowered, so they ended up just taking it out of the game because it was so hard to balance. And again, I think that's just because of the fact that it was just too far unchecked, and there was no way to play around it, or there was no way for counterplay. So my solution to that would be if you made it an ability that was based around something destructible, like, let's say, a drone, flying around in the sky that could be shot down. I think that might be a way to sort of solve that problem. And then that gives you, wide area vision. You could even make it so that, only the light can see, but there's still that drone that can be shot down in the sky. Something like that to help with that sort of recon role identity. And then I would say, for the disruption role, that one's a bit harder to think of. There's a couple different ways that you could go for it. Because as we already saw, you can go with, glitch grenade, which is silencing stuff that disrupts people. You can do gravity vortex that disrupts the way that they move. It would need to be something that's not necessarily damage dealing, but that forces players to have to redo their plans. Like the stun gun was another example that's very unique that helps disrupt the enemy team. As far as like a suggestion for what that could be for something that would be powerful enough to be like a specialization, I would say something that you could do that would help with disruption would be if you could throw out a gadget like, a grenade or something that just launched everyone up into the air, like basically applied the jump pad effect to everybody in an AoE where you throw it down. Give it like a little bit of a warning, like a timer tick, and a pretty strong audio cue, so that way players know that it's going to happen, so they have a chance to like get out of that zone. But basically, yeah, if it just like launched everyone up into the air really quick, like a single jump pad thing, but you're forcing the whole enemy team to be launched into the air whether they wanted to or not, that would be pretty cool. Because I will tell you from playing, when you accidentally step on a jump pad, boy, does that ruin your day. I hate it when there's a jump pad that I didn't notice and I either back up into it or step on it and get launched into the air. So that would be pretty cool as a specialization. If you could just like throw out some ability, whether it be represented by like a grenade throwable or maybe a detonatable device like the gravity vortex, or however you want to do it. Something that's got some counterplay, so it's not like instant or whatever, and maybe is destructible like the anti-grav cube or whatever. And it just pops off just like a single bounce to throw people up into the air. That would be very cool disruption tool for the light to have. So I don't know. Again, I'm not saying it needs to have specifically this ability. I don't want to get into like balance discussion or talking about what would be OP or whatever. The general sort of idea that I would like to propose, that I would hope that somebody who can make these changes would see, would be sort of help that light class find its identity in a way that's like easily recognizable by the majority of players. And I think that would just help the sort of state of the game in general, because I think right now You've got a lot of players being very frustrated with the light class because the majority of people, I think, just don't know what to do with it. And so they just default to DPS and to just using that speed that the class has to run around and get kills, you know, just for the sake of getting kills, which is fine, right? If you want to do that and you want to have fun in like Power Shift or like, you know, Bank It and stuff like that, cool. But I think that if they understood the purpose of the class, that when they got into stuff like even, you know, Quick Cash and World Tour, let alone ranked, that they might be able to play in a sort of more like understandable team role. And so again, I want to emphasize this whole time, I have not been talking about damage. I haven't been talking about any kind of numbers. I don't want to talk about damage or numbers. That's not the point of this. And I think that that is something that people focus in on that is incorrect when they're talking about the light class is, oh, they do too much damage. Oh, they don't have enough damage. Oh, you know, as a light player, I feel like I don't have enough health. I think that really the problem comes down to the utility of the class. And I think that it could just use some stronger focus, a little bit more shaping, still while allowing for freedom of expression and different ways that you can play. But again, just a little bit of a helping hand to help guide people to let them know how they're supposed to be using this class, I think would do wonders for it. I think a lot of other stuff would write itself out. I don't think that they need to worry about buffing and nerfing weapons or HP pools or whatever, or, you know, giving other classes easier ways to deal with them or something. I think that the primary thing that's making lights so polarizing is the class's lack of direction. Lack of direction. The class's lack of direction. So, yeah, I wasn't planning on making another video. Here I am with another video. We're actually 3 videos in after I said I was only going to do the first one, but I sort of realized that like I don't have an outlet to really talk about the finals. And these last 2 videos, I've just been having so much fun talking to people in the comments and talking about this game. And I really love it. And I've got, you know, a 3-stack that I play with, but they've all got other stuff. So whenever they've got free time, we're just focused on playing the game and not really chatting about it necessarily. I mean, we'll talk about balance between matches here and there and stuff, but just getting to really dial down and talk about it has been just like really like satisfying for me. So that's been very cool. And I wanted to thank everybody who took the time to talk to me about this game in my previous videos. And I hope that everybody stays positive and just has fun playing this game. So thank you guys so much, and talk to you later.